the one thing that I do want to let everyone know is that you've been doing this for 33 years, right? And you're in the ninth largest school district. So if I could talk to any pro in the state of Florida on the impact of vouchers and where budgetary issues, I mean, you're the guy. I think there are probably lots of great people, but you're certainly one of the foremost experts in the state of Florida.
I've been around a little bit, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Not in the same role, but yes, I've been around a little bit. So yeah,
Well,
so
we had talked, several years ago, and I appreciate you coming back on
mhm.
about the tax referendum to come in there to build the new schools, and the fact that you guys passed that shows what a quality school district, Orange County is, right? And so now we're on the face of vouchers, and in 2023, vouchers started to really come into the state of Florida, and now they're expanding. And man, I think a lot of people could learn from you on like, well, let me say it this way, Starf. I'm a basic old soldier guy, right? Should people be stressed out about vouchers in public schools, or should we not worry about it?
No, I think so. No, I think absolutely there's a reason to be concerned on a couple of fronts, right? So vouchers have been around in Florida for a long time, but they've morphed over time, right? So we've had, vouchers for exceptional education students. We've had vouchers for poor students. We've had opportunity scholarships, what they called, but taxpayer funded vouchers for students that were in failing schools to be able to make other choices. What happened in 2023 and what you referred to was universal voucher. Like you didn't need to have any of those reasons. You got a voucher because you were a resident in the state of Florida who was of age to attend a K-12 school, and then you can apply. So it didn't matter what your income was, didn't matter if you had prior public attendance in a public school, all of that went away. So at that point, an entitlement was created of about $4 billion that has been shifted to about, well, 70% of the students that are getting that money have never qualified and never been in a public school before. So it's literally pulling $3 billion away from the system and moving it into the private sector in some way. So
So,
yes, it
so
has
Scott,
changed in
the
2020.
yeah, I mean the universal voucher program, and I just did some background research on Texas, and now I'm starting to dig into Florida, right? It's I guess the proponents of it would say, well, look, I mean, parents should have the choice to go wherever they want to. I mean, it's all equal. It's all level. Who cares where the money goes as long as a child gets the education, right? Like that's the argument. And
Right.
are you? I mean, do you support
Right.
that argument? Do you see flaws in it?
No, I mean, we certainly support choice, but with choice, there has to be accountability to the taxpayer. It's a taxpayer funded voucher. So, how do you report out to the taxpayer that this homeschool child or children that took $8,000 out of a system that is accountable and then takes it for themselves to spend it on whatever educational activities they want? Where's the accountability in that? As a taxpayer who's letting my money go to this for this purpose, or is being my money's being taken for this purpose, where do I get the accountability? I know that if I go to my local public school, I could look on their website, they have requirements for accountability. I could go on the state website, but where is that when you're moving this amount of money out of the system? $4 billion could be an amazing tax cut for millions of Floridians. But
Let's
instead, we're moving that money out
you
and
know,
putting it into a place where we don't know what kind of education they're getting.
Scott, let's stick on accountability for a minute because I actually see it
Sure.
as like two different blocks. One is people want accountability with their schools, but I had a vigorous discussion with some Florida lobbyists just last week. A matter of fact, and the funny thing is, Scott, I was meeting with Florida lobbyists, but we were in California. They were out there for
Right.
something else. It was just kind of funny. It's a small universe, right? But their concern was parental accountability. Like a parent, for instance, that says, I want this voucher. They get the money for homeschool. And then they decide to go and put their kid into public school. They've gotten the money in their pocket.
Right.
And right now, there doesn't seem to be in the state of Florida an accountability system or a tracking system to make sure that that money, the schools are going to be. This was their problem. The hypothetical example they pitched was, I'm trying to remember, it was over dinner, was let's assume the parent gets it and they get the voucher, and then like a week goes by, they don't like the private school. Forget it. I don't want it didn't work out, or I decided not to homeschool my kid. I'm gonna go and send them to public school. They were doing pretty good, but they don't return the money. And then you have the people that actually hold the money and are getting like interest off of it, like the brokers that are maintaining these public funds.
Right.
And so you got accountability on, let's talk about the accountability on the money side, not on the school side. We'll get to the school
Sure.
side.
Yeah, and that's a good point on the money side. So we have scholarship funding organizations that the money goes to, and then they distribute the money to the parents if they're homeschool, or to the school if it's a taxpayer funded voucher school, right? The issue is they gave them all the money up front, and then to your point, if the parent decided to move the child after a month or 2 months back to a public school, the money was not following the child. They always say, oh, the money should follow the child. But in our case, the money's not following the child. You know, they say, oh, the money should be put in the backpack and the child should be able to go wherever and take the money with them. Well, they've lost the backpack. Like, they don't know where the backpack it is. We had situations where we were talking to legislators this past session saying that they don't even know where the money is in order to return it to the district. And some districts are waiting 18 months to even get the money back after they've been educating the child for the past 18 months when they come back. So that is a real concern. And we've tried to address it through legislation, asking that they only pay the voucher monthly. Like the state pays the scholarship funding organization every month. So that way they'd have to verify, are they in there the next month? So you're not losing 6 months worth or 10 months worth of funding, that it's only 1 month. And so those are the types of things that aren't in place, and that, yes, money's just being distributed with no accountability.
God, see, it's funny because I'm sitting here thinking about all the issues of running a big school district, any school district, running a school district. And so, you have to pay your payroll every 2 weeks, right? Like, everybody wants a salary. They want their
Right.
paycheck. Okay. I'm just checking because it's funny that like the teachers want their money. They want the grass mowed. We want food in the cafeterias. We want toilet paper in the bathrooms. And then they say, but we may or may not pay you for a year, 18 months, a year and a half.
There's
I
even
mean,
law that, Brian, there's even laws that vendors, we have to pay vendors within 30 days. Like, people that are doing work, there's laws that require us as a school district to do that, but we're not getting that back in the other direction, as far as being able to be paying back for the money that was put out there for the private voucher school.
what do the legislators say when you say you won't give us our money? We had the kids sitting here. The person holding the money, by the way, is getting interest. They're getting a fee for that. I just think everybody should know that it's like these big bankers in on Wall Street. They got $1 billion fund. They're making money even if they're not making money, they're still taking their fee. So somebody holding this money is making a fee. All right. So what do the legislatures say about that? Like, we got to get paid to pay our vendors.
So, I mean, they have, in this last session, have acknowledged, certainly, and one party tends to acknowledge it more than another, but they've both essentially acknowledged it. But again, and have tried to address it by maybe we offered monthly payments, but going to quarterly payments, something. But certainly the lobbyists, to your point, that are lobbying for those organizations that are making money off the interest and the daily interest off of $4 billion, right, being held or shifted, is a lot. And so the longer they can hold on to that money, the more money they'll make for their investors, and the less money that's available for the children that are actually in the public schools.
What do you think? I mean, it feels like that this is like, in theory, like there's so much in theory with legislatures. In theory, school choice is awesome, right? Parents make the choice. All schools rise to the occasion. The best ones succeed in theory. But in practice, this seems so underbaked to me. Why did they wait a year? Why did they try to do a little bit more homework on this?
Well, I mean, I think in reality, the concept is, and again, this goes back 30 years when I began my career. There was only one option for parents. Well, there was two options for parents, but only one no-cost option for parents. They could go to their zone school, which was a zip code that determined where they were going to go to school. And if they didn't want to go there, they could pay money to go to a private school, or they could just keep their child at home. But they weren't getting money to do that, right? And so whatever accountability they were putting on the public school was at that time valid because parents really didn't know and there wasn't a choice. But as choices began to evolve, those things and the ability to decide those things through competition became more important, or more evident as to what schools were doing or not doing. And granted, we can even say for Orange County Public Schools in the year 2000, less than 50% of our kids were graduating on time with a diploma. Now 96% of our kids are graduating. A lot of that has to do with accountability and knowing where you need to target and go after your population. So accountability was good. But when you're using it now as accountability to hold back public schools and allow zero accountability or zero, restrictions, so to speak, or requirements on those schools that are taking the taxpayer funded vouchers, it's not a level playing field. So we're dealing with a competition that's not really competition.
Well,
We're
let's
being held back while they're being able to, be freed up.
so let's kind of I'm gonna write that down. I want to get back. I want to kind of stay right in this accountability thing for a second. So we're
Yeah,
talking about the fact that the parents have the ability to move their students mid-year, different times a year, and maybe through no fault of their own, the money doesn't get to the appropriate school in either direction. There could be fraud, obviously involved in that. And me and these other guys were talking about the potential for people to be like, I'm going to homeschool my kids and then immediately put them in public school, and no one will know that for 18 months or 12 months or whatever it is. So,
right.
but now let's talk about the accountability on the school side, because you started drifting into that side of the accountability. So, you, right now, how are let's frame this. How are public schools accountable to the parents right now? And you said, graduation rates, test scores,
Yeah,
public boards, things like that.
sure. So, I mean, a parent can go online, whether it's at the state or at the local level. We're required to post our results. We test our students 3 times a year. We do our accountability system is then very public as far as how our schools are doing, how they're graded based on those outcomes. And so parents know from one public school to the other which one is better, which one is an A school, which one is a C school, what the reading scores are, graduation rates for high schools. They can see all that, and all of that is very public and is required to be. On the flip side of that, they don't have those requirements on the private sector. So no one knows how those students are. They say that they're taking the standardized test or that one, but there's no correlation and no comparison. And so it would behoove the entire system if there was a full accounting of how those students are doing in both places, so that there is that accountability back to the taxpayer that's making that investment.
It is kind of weird, because it's like, then if there's no actual data that makes school A better than school B, you would think you'd pick the school with the better data, right? School B, right? But parents aren't doing that. They're going to, so I think they're going to start using these vouchers. It's kind of like when a new restaurant opens up in a community for like breakfast, especially breakfast space, right? Everybody goes to the new breakfast spot, even though your old breakfast spot had the best food, great, good pricing, but you got to go try the new place. So I think a lot of people will shift just because the grass is greener. So, you're in the comms business and you've been an expert on that for a while. What do you think will drive them to use a voucher without the corresponding like transparency?
Well, I think you can, certainly you can be sold on a number of different things. We hear that that parents, are seeking, more innovative programs or specific ways that children are being educated, or an environment that's not as structured, that maybe is more an educational environment that's more open, open learning, that type of thing. So, parents sometimes are looking for other alternatives to the standard type of education. And again, if that's fine, but we don't know what those outcomes are because they're not necessarily being measured and posted in comparison to what children who are in similar circumstances as they are and what they're doing and attaining in a traditional public school that is being tested and accounted for.
It was kind of like this term open learning. It sounds kind of good in theory, like because I was talking with some people here in the office. I'm like, we have yet to ever give a standardized test to anybody. Like not one employee have we ever give a standardized test, right? We want problem
Right.
solvers. So open learning, it theoretically makes you think, oh, problem solvers. But then this whole like, have you heard of this unschooling thing? No schooling or unschooling? Like children are feral.
Yeah.
That's probably
Yeah.
an extreme example of open learning. They can learn whatever they want to, whenever they want, and
Right.
then they probably think the Earth is flat, you know. and,
Right.
and so open learning could be good, I guess, to your point, but it could also be really disastrous too. We just don't know.
Well, there's a difference, I think, between the Socratic method where you're asking open-ended questions and you're trying to get to an answer the truth versus just saying, hey, learn however you learn or whatever, through metamorphosis or
So
whatever. I mean, because you do have, and I don't know, you've probably seen these, but the growth in micro schools. So micro schools came about after or during COVID, during the pandemic, where you had parents that brought children together in a cohort and then hired a teacher to, basically supervise their learning, not to teach them necessarily, but to facilitate learning. And so the parents drove what they were learning, the curriculum, they pulled it from different areas. And it's generally private, but funded through the voucher system now. And that's continuing to grow. And I think, there's some appeal to that because parents who are their children's first teacher then can go on and have more influence as to what they're learning, how they're learning, and building their own. But in reality, we don't know how they're doing, right?
well, we
And the
also
outcomes.
it's also such a kind of myopic approach. Is it is that I want my wife to teach our child. I want to teach my child. I want you teaching my child. I want the community
Right.
teaching my child. I want her to get as much diverse information as possible to become a better collective individual, right? And I'm limited and I'm biased and just like every other human being. And so these micro things were like, okay, so you've taught them and you're going to continue to teach them. Like that's it. That's their whole learning journey is going to be one voice until they become an adulthood. And then they're going to it's like waking up from a cult. Potentially that's probably an extreme
Right.
example, but you've been in one little teeny universe your entire life, and now there's this whole big world that you weren't exposed to. And so that's
Well,
certainly a parent's choice, but you're right about the accountability side
yeah.
of it.
And the micro schools, they could be like the one room schoolhouse, like back in in the 1800s, where you just had, a group of children learning, differentiated and at their own pace in their own with just a facilitator, working with them. And so again, it goes back to, are they learning what they need to know to be successful in life, whether they're going to go to a career or college or both, and it, that's what we don't know and where
Well,
this investment's
you know,
heading.
Scott, you go back to the run room schoolhouse, right? And yeah, I used to watch Little House on the Prairie. I get the image, and here's my image of it. You got a 17 or 18-year old in the same class with a first grader. Somebody is not learning what they need to be. Somebody's being hampered or pushed too far because they're not the same learning level. And you've got one
Right.
teacher trying to do all these different curriculum and all it, it worked for the time because that's all we had. But we stopped doing it because it didn't create a diversity of education and allowing people to pace on their own level. Like I'm not against like rapid learning and specialized learning programs,
Right.
EPL programs, all those different things. But it it going back to accountability, what's the auditing process? So if that one teacher is not doing a good job in that one room schoolhouse, that micro learning, whatever, there's nobody to counterbalance that.
No.
You're getting one perspective. Okay, so we go to the accountability of the testing. So So why is it that
But
parents aren't
the
demanding?
ultimate, but that's the thing. The ultimate accountability has always been on the shoulders for those other decisions, other than public school, has always been on the shoulders of parents. We've heard time and time again, parents will vote with their feet. If they're not happy with their education, they'll walk and go somewhere else. And so in that case, they don't really have the information. It's kind of like if you're shopping in the grocery store and you pull a product off the shelf, you know the ingredients of everything because it's required to be on there.
Hmm.
But if you went, down to your local farmer's market where they were, making stuff and putting it in jars and you didn't know, you'd have no idea what was in there. And that's pretty much what you're doing. You're saying, hey, I don't want what's in the grocery store where I know what's in it. I'm going to go down the street to the local farmer's market where I have no idea what's in it, what's happening, and I'm going to take that. And it tastes good and it looks good and I like it, so that's what I'm going to go with. But
Well,
but in reality, you don't know what it's doing
well,
to
well, maybe
to your
maybe it
mind.
is good. Like maybe that those other programs, and I think it'll be different for every type of school. Like maybe that micro school or that private school is fantastic, and those students really grow. The the issue I get is it's the short term penalty of people trying to figure this out, right? So this universal vouchers, it's here, it's growing rapidly. People are going to start taking advantage of it. And what I think about is, so you have a public school. Let's just assume it has 100,000 students for round numbers. 100,000 students, right, Scott?
Right.
And 20,000 of them decide to boogie for 1 year, and they leave and they go off and try to find grass is greener. Well, that is a massive budgetary impact on that public school. And then when they want to come back in a year, that public school has gutted all kinds of programs because of that short term. I know. What do you think that the budget impact of all these? Let's talk about it. I know I'm kind of wondering here. I'm still trying to figure all this out myself. Is like we have a short term budgetary impact, and
Right.
what do you think that that's going to be right now?
Well, I mean, I can give you an example. So we've seen declining enrollment in our district because of the taxpayer funded voucher, but also because of declining birth rates. So during the pandemic, for about an 18-month window, there was a significant decline in births. And so that's showing up 5 years later in our kindergarten enrollment. And it happened last year and it'll happen this year. So we're seeing a reduction there, but we're also seeing parents that are making the choice to move, to not even come in and take their kids. So we've seen a 25% reduction in kindergarten, which if that reduction holds, it'll float through the entire system all the way through the 13 years of that student's journey or that cohort's journey. So the 3,000 students that we lost as a result of that is about between 27 and $28 million. And so our adjustment to that, to your point, is we reduce personnel proportionate to the number of students. So if you lost 20,000 students and you reduce personnel, and then those 20,000 came back or 15,000 came back, you would have to ramp back up those, and bring back teachers to fill those slots, one. And then in other cases, you may be making plans to consolidate schools or to do other things. And in Florida, we have what co-location of schools now. So any capacity that's available, charter schools can co-locate in those schools. And so we may commit to a charter school or have to a charter school coming in, and then there's no capacity for the students that want to come back who weren't the parents weren't happy with the decision that they made. So there's all sorts of issues, budgetary, facility planning, everything else that go into that would cause friction within the system when parents try to re-enroll or try to come back.
Well, Scott,
So
you're super pro, and the way that you're laying it out, it sounds very professional and more. I'm a guy on the ground kind of guy. A lot more. I think I'm in the mud a little bit more sometimes. I'd like to keep you out of that. But you talk about like facilities. The parents won't let you close the schools. I mean, they're not going to let you close the schools. I mean, this is happening around the nation where there are literally riots because we said we don't have enough students to support the school, and it would benefit the students today if we brought them all into one school. You'd have a nurse, you'd have a counselor, you'd have better extracurricular activities, but instead, the parents are, you can't close the school because I went to that school and it's in our neighborhood school and it's the school that our family's been a part, and it's super emotional, and I understand that. logic has nothing to do with it. It's a very emotional decision not to close a school. And the
Right.
public schools are the ones left to try to figure out how to maintain it. And they're having to cut all the extra programs, which make you even less competitive. So, how do you really handle that when they won't let you?
Yeah, I mean that to your point, it's very difficult. I mean, we've consolidated schools in the past, and they've been schools that are significantly under enrolled just because even the communities themselves have evolved or aged out. And so building, we've been able to build state-of-the-art facilities because of the taxpayer support, the half-cent sales tax in Orange County, to build new facilities that are brand new high-tech facilities. And the communities eventually, say after they see what's going to happen and they see where they are, it doesn't make sense. That's not the case in every case. That's only when you have schools that are 60, 70 years old that it's obvious they need to be, shut down or consolidated. But when you have some that are historical to a neighborhood, right? So they have an alumni base that is very supportive, of the junior high that they went to. That's now a middle school, and you say you're going to consolidate middle schools, and this one will no longer exist. There's a lot of people in the community and that had attended that school. To your point, family generationally, that they say you're not closing that school. You're not consolidating that school. We won't let that happen. We don't want that to happen. And we've been here and we've been taxpayers. And so it is a fight, and that is a problem. And, with losing student population, you can't continue to operate a school that is not operationally efficient, that you're paying twice as much to operate it than you are a school that is at the right capacity and the right enrollment level to
Yeah,
fund everything that you need to fund.
it's funny. It's almost as if the inability to close a school absolutely proves that public schools have more accountability to parents, because a charter school, private school, they don't have to get parental involvement. They just make those decisions, and there's no board, there's no FOIA
Yeah, they
request for.
they can pack up in the middle of the night and take off, and
Yeah,
they've done it. It's
yeah.
happened.
Well, it
So
has happened, but it's like,
yeah, the parents show up and go, "Wait a minute, I thought school was open. Yep, no, it's
yeah,
closed."
yeah. But public schools have to actually be present and are accountable, and because of that accountability we want, it makes you have to take on financial burdens that maybe you wouldn't otherwise, right?
Right.
So that was kind of interesting. It's like, yeah, that's kind of the evidence that public schools are more accountable to parents. Okay, so as you're
And
getting
the taxpayer,
in the
because it meant even
taxpayers,
parents, it's just people that pay taxes that went to that school, right? And they are
yeah, that's
invested
right.
in more than one way. So
Yeah, a lot of times you're right. I've been to those town hall meetings and they don't even have children anymore, but they still go to the high
yeah.
school games. They still want to watch those games and have fun. And yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Okay. So in preparation for the 25-26 school year, what are some of your recommendations to start getting ready?
So as far as as
Yeah, to get
far
ready, if you were going to, give some advice to all the other public schools in the state of Florida and Texas and New Jersey and et cetera, what would you tell them to start doing to get ready and in the short term?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that when I started my journey 15 years ago, when I came downtown and was working, it was all about the reputation of the school district. Thank you for choosing Orange County Public Schools. We want to be your school district. Like that was the emphasis, right? And over the last 9 years, it's been convincing everyone that we need to maintain a really good relationship, that we're good stewards of our taxpayer dollars. We're providing a high quality education as a system for our students, for our families, for our community. But we have to emphasize that parents choose their local school. And so the reputation of that school and how they interact with the community, the way that their perception is within the community, the way that parents are talking about that school in that local neighborhood, that is so important. And more, I believe school leaders, district leaders need to emphasize the fact that we need to market our schools. What are our schools providing for our students, for our community, for our parents that they may not know about? Because 30 years ago, you didn't have to. You knew who was walking through the door. Anyone who was zoned in that zone was coming through your door, or they were going to pay to go somewhere else. Today, they have so many other choices. And so it becomes inherent to the positions of leadership to really market down to the school level and to make sure that they know what that school is doing for children and what it can do for their child, and making sure that every child or prospect that comes through that door is treated not in a systematic way, but in a humanistic way, that we're treating them and we're showing compassion and empathy and trying to do whatever we can to have them come into our school and stay in our schools, because that's what the competition is doing. And so we, as a public school system, need to really eradicate the idea of system and become more humanizing and really do that.
Do you have some examples in your head about what that actually looks like on a like teacher to
Yeah, I
parent
give you an
type
example of
situation?
what happened in one of our schools. It was an example that was shared with me the other day. And I'll just give you an example. One of my employees was driving their children to school, first day of school. They were driving down the road.
Mhm.
They look over, they see this mom walking her twins, girls. They were about 5 years old, kindergarten age, all dressed up, gussied up for school. She's driving down the road. She parks, goes in, takes her kid, one of her kids, into their classroom, takes the other student and child into their classroom, sees the mom come in. She's, excited with the girl, and then hears some interaction about the paperwork and this and that. And then she comes back out and she sees mom on the first day of school with their brand new kindergarten twins, who she walked there, were probably all excited for the first day. That front office person turned them around and sent them home because they didn't have the right paperwork.
Are you?
Right.
No,
That, Brian, that happens all the time in all of our schools.
I know it
Instead of
does. I
saying
know
to
it
mom,
does. And I would say that Orange County is starting to do a lot more training of front desk workers. I know you guys are starting to focus on
yeah,
that so that you're actually making the front leaning people, the bus drivers, the front desk people actually understand that it's a competitive game.
right, right.
And
And
they can't act like the Department of Motor Vehicles, you know?
right. And I mean, you think about it from the standpoint of what could that what could the staff have done for that mom? Hey, look, you know, leave the girls here. We'll make sure that they have a good experience. Go take care of, we can't put them in a classroom just because of laws, but to be more understanding of the situation so that they have a good feeling about that first day. Because you can never get that back. That first impression can never be, given again. Like that mom making that walk back. And so to me, we have to understand the human side. What are they going through? What took that, what did it take for them to get there? And how can we keep them there? Right. And it's every child. It's not, we're not looking at the collective anymore. It's individual.
Yeah, so
And so,
that's I think that's such great advice, and it goes back to the old golden rule: treat people as you'd like to be treated. I mean, it
right.
is as simple as that in some ways, but the anxiety, the stress that I've seen that front desk workers have, because I mean, they get yelled at, they get every single problem dumped on their desk, they get overwhelmed. In many cases, in many districts across the United States, they're underpaid, they're undertrained. It's such a hard job. But to love on your front desk people, if you're a principal or a teacher watching, to love on your front desk people and take some of their
Yes.
anxiety and stress off so they can handle these problems in a more proactive
Right.
way. I think they're all good people, but sometimes, even, we can lose our temper at some, or get impatient. And
Right.
so I think that's great advice, is to start treating everyone as an individual and try to solve problems and support your front desk people. I think that's great. Now, the
And just the more, the kindness, just treating them with kindness can sometimes de-escalate that anyway situation that's coming in, so that, you are treating them not as a product that's coming through the door, like an Amazon delivery. You're treating them like a human being, and they have a situation that they're going through. How do you help to resolve that situation
How do you
for
treat
that
people
person?
as an opportunity instead of a problem?
Right,
His mom came in. It's an opportunity to showcase how awesome you are. Instead, it's like a burden and it's a
right.
problem to deal with this. It's a hassle. It's a hassle. And that's it. Yeah, that's something I think all public schools, well, everybody should be working on, right?
Yeah,
Certainly your competition is.
right.
The charter schools, the private schools, they are given first class ribbon cutting. They're investing a lot of money in the marketing of themselves. I don't know how much money is going to the academic. I'm sure it's every school's individual. Okay. So
Right.
long term, do you have any advice to school districts as far as trying to work with the state legislatures or lobby for things to make this a more competitive space and to hold everyone equally accountable? Do you have any suggestions on that?
You know, it just depends on, and obviously around the nation, you have different makeups of state legislators or state legislatures. In Florida, we're a one party state, and then that party is pro choice at any cost. And again, public education has to fight for, every possible um angle that we can get in order to try to be more competitive. One of the things that we've pushed for over and over again, and we hope that they'll continue to revisit it, is let's free up public schools from the onerous restrictions that we have. We've provided lists of things that private schools don't have to do that we have to do. We're not saying take away accountability, hold us accountable. We'll still do the testing and that side of it. But all the other things that we're required to do, that we have to spend money on, that we have to provide resources for, that we can't focus on what we want to focus on, which is really serving our students and our parents and our employees, but have to do these other things that the state requires us that charter schools may not have to do and that private schools definitely don't have to do.
Yeah, so
And so,
a lot of bureaucracy is kind of what you mean, a lot of paperwork,
yeah,
filling things out in
and just say,
triplicate.
look, now that there's competition, let's have true competition. Let's free us up too, right? Take those administrative requirements off of public school, because they certainly aren't where the money's going in the form of taxpayer funded vouchers.
Yeah, and there are some things though that I'm really glad creates, like I'm not a big fan of bureaucracy, but there are so many good laws to protect students and families, like the Americans with Disabilities Act,
Right,
Title I, Title VI, Title IX. These are all great laws that require a level of paperwork and bureaucracy, but they're good laws. I would hope that those laws would have the same legal requirements of anyone that takes taxpayer money. So if you take
right,
a voucher, you take taxpayer money, you should be obligated to do all ADA requirements just like a public school, which is not
right.
true either. And so that's a little weird to me. It's like, I don't want to get rid of, I know I'm shocked to say this. I hate bureaucracy. I was in the army too long, but some levels of bureaucracy to protect people and these laws is a really good thing. But how come we have to be obligated to do all of it, but they get taxpayer money and they don't even have to have necessarily wheelchair ramps everywhere or
Right.
learning disabled classes? I, it's not equal, right? So
Or there's facility requirements that says you have to do X, Y, and Z if you're a public school, but if you take facility dollars in your charter school, you don't have to do that, right? You're
right,
exempt from doing those things, and it costs 10 times as much to do it on a traditional public school side than it would on a charter school side, for example.
yeah, I just keep kind of digging into this accountability and bureaucracy issues, and I think about these state legislatures that are passing these vouchers, right? And I, I've dealt with a lot of elected officials over decades in multiple states, and they're busy people too. And I think that most of them, by and large, mean well. They want to do the right thing. School choice in theory sounds awesome. Do you really think that most legislatures understand the nuance of this not level playing field, of this lack of accountability? Do you think they understand it, or is it just it's a good thing for a speech to say school choice?
I think some of them know the unlevel playing field. I think some of them don't care. that it's unlevel. I think in fact, they want it to be not level.
Really?
Yeah,
God,
I
that
think
makes
there
me.
are some that would want to provide the advantage to continue to pull the system apart.
I
I believe that, but
well,
I believe there are good, solid legislators on both sides of the aisle that truly believe that there's too much that there is bureaucracy in place or protections in place for children, but that sometimes we go overboard in some areas or make requirements that for public schools that don't necessarily need to be there and aren't there for private. I think that those legislators are working hard on both sides of the aisle to do some of that. What I've seen on the other hand is they don't really care. They'll put more and more restrictions and oneruses on public school, traditional public school, just allowing private school to do whatever.
that I have yet to find a legislature that will directly look me in the eye and say, I don't care about public education. I think it's a mess and I want to destroy it. Or even dance around that. Typically,
They're never say that like
people are pretty frank
publicly.
with me. I mean, behind closed doors.
It's not, but it's not what you say, it's what you do,
Yeah.
right? It's you can talk, but when you're filing legislation that's the opposite of what you're saying, then that's a problem. I mean, we
Yeah.
can point to legislators that are filing legislation that's in direct contrast to what they're telling you when they say they support public education. Yeah, we support it. We believe in accountability. Look, we're going to put more accountability on public education. Okay, so you believe in accountability. Why aren't you doing that with private schools that are taking taxpayer dollars and funding their operations? Oh, well, they're private.
Well,
Okay.
there's an old, I don't know, it's not Occam's razor, but it's one of those kind of proverb things where it's like, never assume ill intent when incompetence explains the end result. And I
Right.
often think that there's a lot of incompetence because of time. They don't dig into the subject. They don't really learn the different subjects. They're not just passing an education bill, they're passing tons of different topics, and it's hard to know everything. I really hope that it's a lack of knowledge on their part and more of an inexperience or incompetence than it's actually malicious. Because if it's malicious, and it could be, I'm terrified because the history of nations that have gotten rid of free public education has been disastrous over generations. So I'm sad now because you're probably right. You're probably right.
I hope I'm not. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, public schools needs to go away. We're doing everything we can to eliminate public education. They're never going to say that. But legislation that they file and the way that they behave when they're passing laws is the opposite of that. It supports that they're trying to get rid of public education. So for
Well,
whatever reason that is.
well, Scott, I've kept you quite a bit on this, and I know we're going to keep digging around with vouchers and these programs with school choice, especially going down the road. You have any final thoughts to kind of get our spirits up for our our public school team and how we need to
I
handle?
just think that, with all of the things that are happening at the state level and federal level when it comes to public education, we just need to continue to focus on children, right? And doing what's best for children. I've come to work every day for, as Brian said, for almost 34 years now, 33 years, focused on what they need to succeed. What do I need to do or what can I do? And a lot of the choice and this voucher, this open-ended, has really opened my eyes to reevaluating a lot of the systems and things that are in place that cause issues for our parents that we do to ourselves that we can remove in order to create a better environment for them to come into our public schools and to welcome them. And I think we need to look at those things and do everything we can to modify those to make it a better experience for our families that want to come to public school and not put barriers up or artificial that we control.